Welcome to this video where I analyze and rank every scene in 1981's Halloween 2. This movie has some really strong scenes that feel almost in sync with the original, and then it has scenes that are kind of comical in how badly they're executed. I already did one of these for the original Halloween. You can check out the link above to watch that video. Otherwise, let's get started on Halloween 2. In last place, we had the most useless scene in Halloween 2. It's the school scene where Loomis finds Sam Hain written on the chalkboard. Logically, the scene makes no sense. Like, when did Michael come to the school? Was it during the events of the original Halloween? Or is it after he killed Alice and before he found out that Laurie was taken to the hospital, so he was just killing time? And then while he's here, he just like rifles through some homework to find the perfect picture to then stab the knife into? Why is he writing Sam Hain on the board? Like, is he just purposely dropping clues for people? Like, this just feels so irrelevant and it doesn't make any sense. At number 29, we have Jimmy waking up Laurie after her surgery. So I'm gonna try to ignore like the stupidity of this, that someone would go and wake up someone who just had major surgery just to say, hey, can I get you a Coke? Obviously, you'd want to get Pepsi. Pepsi's so much better. But the scene is really low because it's kind of transparent that it's just to give Jamie Lee Curtis some screen time because she has like nothing to do in this movie until the last 20 minutes. And the rest of the scene, it feels like it's setting up the hospital and these characters so that you have an awareness of like, okay, this is who Michael's been going to come after and this is the location that he's going to be at. But I don't think it actually works. It just feels very bland. At number 28, we have a scene that makes me ranking every scene in this movie actually feel useful. It's the autopsy scene. One of the important things with a scene is that it has to matter. And this scene doesn't matter to the audience because we already knew that Michael Myers was alive at this point. So the reveal that this is like a 17-year-old doesn't move the needle whatsoever for us. And even though this reveal is important to Dr. Loomis as a character, that doesn't change his plot at all. He still goes off to the Myers house. He still goes to the school. He's still not involved with really anything until the end of the movie. So this scene is short and harmless, but it's also utterly pointless. At number 27, we have the short scene where Loomis and Marion Chambers leave the school. So there's not much here, but what I like about it and why it's higher than the previous scenes is there's like this sense of loss and genuine devastation to both Dr. Loomis and Deputy Hunt here that I really like. Next up, we've got Mr. Garrett's death. And this is the most boring scene in Halloween 2, bar none. The kill itself is great, but that's like 3 seconds out of 6 minutes. It's the longest scene in the movie, and it has no business being this long. What this scene needed was some variety, like change a camera angle, or have something from Michael's point of view, or show Michael in the background, or have some music, or have Michael's breathing. Like, those are all techniques that John Carpenter used in the original, but Rick Rosenthal here just is building the scene just to build up to a jump scare. Like, there's literally nothing happening, and it's superficially tense because jump scares are loud and surprising, but it's not actually scary. And whenever people say like Halloween 2 feels like a natural extension of Halloween 1, I have to watch them back to back because they feel like the same movie, I'm always like, does it really? Because Mr. Garrett's death scene feels like it's from a completely different universe than like Annie's death scene in the original. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. I hope I didn't come off as too judgmental. It's just, the scene just drags for me. At number 25 is Bud scaring Karen, which is a pointless scene, but is an example of things that Rosenthal does well. He's good at these short burst scenes that don't last too long and actually build to something. Like here we've got her getting scared by the buzzer, and then this long shot of her just walking down the hallway. And that's actually legitimately suspenseful because you don't know what's gonna happen. Eventually it's a fake scare with Bud, but it doesn't drag on. At number 24, we have Marion Chambers and Dr. Loomis talking in the school. And this scene is short, but it's a good Loomis character scene with him kind of scoffing at the idea that everyone's like, oh man, Michael Myers is dangerous. We should have known this, when he'd been telling everyone for years. And it does feel like a major blow when she tells him that a marshal is going to take him out of town. Like, you feel like this is Loomis at his lowest point in the movie. Actually, can a character have two lowest points? Because Ben Tramer's death is next in these rankings. I love the dynamic between Brackett and Loomis in the police car before Ben Tramer shows up. Like, it's an amplification of their dialogue and conversations from the first one. Loomis has taken it up a notch in terms of his kind of overzealous determination, which is why Ben Tramer gets killed here. Like, it's just fun seeing him kind of losing his handle on the situation. And as cheesy as this whole thing is, I mean, it is cheesy. That's why it's this low in the rankings. But it's still somehow fun to watch that cop car barreling down that residential neighborhood and plowing into this poor trick-or-treater and smashing into this van that was filled with, what, dynamite? I don't know. It's just so much fun. And this is one scene where nostalgia is definitely coloring my emotions, because I just can't help but enjoy the scene the same way I did when I was like 10. At number 22, we have Laurie being taken to the hospital. And this scene is only even this high because it's on the longer side. Like, it's almost a real-time sequence of Laurie being transported from the Doyle house to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, which is an essential part of the plot, but it's also unnecessarily long. It's unnecessarily detailed. Like, do we need to see her being put to sleep? We meet a lot of characters, but other than Jimmy and Bud and learning that Dr. Mixter does surgery when drunk, we don't actually learn much. And then the kid with the razor blade in his mouth, like, why do we need that? It's like pointless violence. Like, I love violence in slasher movies, but that just seems like completely irrelevant. At number 21, we have Brackett finding Annie's body. Or I guess he doesn't find her body. He is shown her body, but regardless, number 21. I like the scene for Brackett, like, just seeing this father and his loss. Like, I think it's a subtle and pretty well acted scene. I love his, like, anger at Loomis, like, taking out on him. And I think it adds an element of depth to Loomis's characterization, that he is sort of taking on the responsibility for what's happening. Like, you can see the remorse on his face. And then we get a great Loomis rant about Michael and what he represents to Deputy Hunt. At number 20, we have Laurie's dream. Logically, this scene bothers me because it's such a convenient way for Laurie to learn that Michael's her brother. Like, the repressed memories suddenly come back. But what I like about the scene is the dreamlike quality to it. That's a feeling that Rick Rosenthal does inject into this movie. Is there's a lot of like these nightmarish images, and like, so combining her dream about young Michael with shots of like blood dripping, which we later learn is from Mrs. Alves, such a creepy element to this scene. At number 19, we have the final scene in the movie. No, this doesn't compare at all with the original's ending, but still, like, the shots of Michael's mask just burning up, and in 4K you could see that it's literally melting. That combined with using the Mr. Sandman song again, it's just a good, strong ending, and could have been a really strong ending to the entire series if they had just left things alone. At number 18, we've got the scene at the Myers house. Per usual, Donald Pleasance is top notch. Like, his lines about Michael being in many ways the ideal patient, sublime. I like the touch of Haddonfield kind of on edge here. It's subtle and in the background in this movie. And of course, the Ben Tramer reveal, like, that is such a cool connection to the first movie. But as atmospheric as this scene is, it can't hide the fact that it's essentially a repeat of the exact same scene from the first movie. At number 17, we have Michael roaming around the back alleys after the opening credits. This scene is really good and would be way higher if it didn't end with the Alice death, because everything before that is fantastic. Like the POV shots, hearing Dr. Loomis lie about how many times he shot Michael, seeing Michael behind Mrs. Elrod, these are all fantastic. But Alice's death is just like a transparent attempt to inject more gore into the movie. Like, it's not scary. There's no real buildup or suspense. And then the jump scare, like, where was Michael in this living room? It's so dumb. It's a shame that it drags the rest of this opening down. At number 16, we have Jimmy telling Laurie about Michael Myers. So I think this scene is actually really strong atmospherically. Good usage of the Myers house theme. Jamie Lee Curtis is really good as she realizes something is awry. And even though Mr. Garrett's boring ass stalking scene follows this, I do think this scene sets up that the hospital staff is in imminent danger pretty well when Mrs. Alves realizes the phone lines are cut. I don't like the random shot of Michael walking. Like, that just seems pointless, but overall a good scene. At number 15, we have Michael watching Jimmy and Jill. And this scene is this high because I think this is maybe the most creative use of the hospital setting, where you see Michael and the security camera going into this room, and then you hear the door, and then you see Jill going towards the very same room. That's just such a unique twist. It adds suspense, and I think the scene is just really well done. Wait, no, it's not super well done. Michael standing very obviously is kind of annoying, but everything before that is really good. At number 14, we have Michael getting into the hospital. There are some creepy shots here, like Michael in the mirror, Michael in the security footage, the door shutting as Jimmy walks by. Those all work. There's some decent character stuff. The characters are mostly boring in this movie, but there's some good stuff for Karen, Bud, and Jimmy in the break room. The Janet stuff is dumb, like, oh, she doesn't like cursing. Oh, what a great character trait. But my biggest issue with this scene is it feels like it should be more suspenseful. Like, it feels like it's trying to show that Michael is now in the hospital and these characters are in danger. But I don't think I get a sense of that in this scene because geographically, I have no idea where the break room is relative to this door that Michael just got in. So I don't think the scene works as well as it's intended to, but it's solid enough. At number 13, we have the recap of the first movie, and this stuff is all better in the first movie. Like, the music is better, the pacing is better, but this scene is this high for two things. Using the Mr. Sandman music, I think that just adds a creepy element right from the beginning. And then Dr. Loomis's immortal line to finish the scene.
You don't know what death is.
Number 12, we got the opening credits, and I don't really need to go into too much detail about them. They're great opening credits, but I do want to shout out that pumpkin opening up into the skull. This was my first Halloween movie I ever saw, and I remember seeing that and being like, oh shit, what am I in for? At number 11, we have Michael hearing where Laurie is. So this scene struggles a bit to start because we hadn't seen Michael in like 10 or 15 minutes, so the movie's lacking momentum at this point. But then when the kid played by Dick Warlock's son runs into Dick Warlock's chest, well, this Dick Warlock, let's not go with that joke. When that kid runs into Michael's chest, things just come to life. The music kicks in. Watching Michael walk through, like, I guess the Haddonfield Town Square while all these people don't really realize who he is, that's just got this underlying layer of creepiness to it that I really appreciate. Now we're at the top 10, and I feel like Halloween 2 plays nicely with these rankings because every scene I've talked about so far, I think those are between good and bad. I think the top 10 are all different levels of great. And number 10 is Dr. Loomis finding out about Laurie Strode and Michael Myers' relationship. So whether or not you like this plot twist, I think it's an effective moment in the movie. I don't really like how Sam Hain was introduced in the school, but I do like the monologue that Dr. Loomis delivers. It just makes the movie actually feel larger than it actually is. And then the comedy in the scene with Loomis holding the marshal at gunpoint, that's just a great ending to the scene.
What do you fellas usually do? Fire a warning shot, right?
At number 9, we've got Michael watching Nurse Karen and Mrs. Alves. This scene, I think, is one of those scenes that gets the closest to the feel of the original movie. Like Michael roaming the hospital hallways with that POV, with the breathing. It's all great. The shot of him watching Karen and Mrs. Alves as they're talking while they don't realize he's there. One of the best shots in the series. Some minor nitpicks though, like when Michael is starting to walk out of the room and he sees Mrs. Alves and his POV just like backs up. That makes Michael come off as clumsy. Like in the first movie, he was like a wraith where it felt like he just knew where to be. Here, it's like, oh, he almost bumbled his way right into her. And then when he's walking away at the end, it again looks like, oh, I'm just gonna get out of here. Hope no one notices me. Takes away a tiny bit of that mystique to this character, but still a phenomenal scene. At number 8, we have Janet's death. And this is a really short scene, but it's like one creepy shot after another. And this is where Halloween 2's elevated violence, I think, helps the movie. Like, it doesn't feel pointlessly bloody. It just feels nasty. The only issue I have with the scene is there's a lack of build-up to it. It's kind of a quick hitter, which maybe that's a good thing considering how poorly Rosenthal directed Mr. Garrett's stalking scene. And that actually reminds me, I think Mr. Garrett's stalking sequence might have worked better if it had actually been Janet who died in that scene, because they cut to Janet a couple of times. She's just standing there with a walkie-talkie, and the movie is like building to Mr. Garrett being killed. I think it would have been pretty shocking if the scene ended with Michael actually killing Janet. I don't know if it would have been better than Janet's death here, but what do you guys think? Do you think that Mr. Garrett scene actually would have been better if it had culminated in Janet being killed? Or do you like it how it is? At number 7, we've got the first part of the final chase between Laurie and Michael. So I'm considering Jill's death a separate scene. This one starts right after her death. And this is a great scene. There are a lot of creepy shots that I really enjoy and have marked me since I saw this movie as a kid. My problem is Michael's attacks are so wimpy in this scene. Like twice, he's got her cornered, absolutely cornered. And his attacks, though, just feel like he's flailing around or just barely poking his hand through this elevator door. So there's a lack of ferocity to Michael in this scene that kind of hinders it. At number 6, we've got the parking lot scene. And so this scene has a lot of top tier elements. Like Jimmy showing up unexpectedly in the car. That's a good fake out scare. Jimmy passing out on the horn. That shit terrifies me. Just like you're trying to be quiet, trying to hide from Michael, and just give away where you are. Then Laurie struggling to cry out for help. Just an iconic line reading from Jamie Lee Curtis. Help me! And then Michael chasing her in the parking lot. That part's pretty short, but man, it's intense. Him walking right through the plate glass window. Dumb as hell, but satisfying as hell. This is a great scene. And just so you know, I am cutting the scene off right before he kills the marshal. At number 5, we have Jimmy finding Mrs. Alves. I think this is the second most atmospheric and suspenseful scene in the movie. Like, we have the one long shot of Jimmy walking through this hallway and then past the door, and then you see the white of Mrs. Alves' uniform. I think that's a terrifying image. And seeing that Mrs. Alves' blood has been drained from her body, yeah, the logistics of that death makes no sense, but that is so unsettling. It makes me cringe, like, in a good way. And then Jimmy slipping on the blood. When I was a kid, I did not like that because I wanted Michael to do something. Or I wanted Jimmy to survive because he's Michael Brody from Jaws of Revenge, which also when I was a kid was one of my favorite movies because I'm an idiot. But no, Jimmy slipping on the blood, it's like a 180 from what you would expect. So it comes as a shock. And then it ends with this image that kind of cements this movie's visual style, like that nightmarish tone that I mentioned earlier. It's just a really well-executed scene. At number 4, we've got Jill's death. And this includes all the stuff in the parking lot right before her death. But low-key, I feel like Jill has the best build-up plus payoff for any character death in the movie. Because we had a couple of scenes where it seemed like Michael might get her, and it didn't happen. So then we have this very suspenseful scene in the parking lot, and I always get squeamish and antsy in scenes where characters are about to escape and just can't manage to do it. So like the movie's been building to Jill's death, and it all pays off with Laurie being like, okay, let me slowly get moving, let me try it. And then Jill's like, hey Laurie, how's it going? And then Michael just comes out, all of that build up, and he's just there, lifts her up, shoes drop off in an incredible visual, and the chase is on. At number 3, we have a chase, but not the chase I just mentioned. Nope, this is the part from where the marshal gets killed till Michael gets blown up. And this is here because I think it perfectly concludes the character arcs. So Michael Myers is at his most Terminator-esque in this scene, his most shapiest. Like he's just this inevitable force of nature, just slowly approaching, shrugging off these shots to the eyes with just, you know, some very creepy imagery, but then he's just slashing at Laurie like nothing's gonna stop him. Even getting blown up by Loomis, his fiery silhouette still emerges from the debris. I think this scene really captures what Michael Myers is. And then Loomis, his character arc, all the guilt, all the remorse, all the frustration, everything piling up on him in this movie. Like, I can't imagine a more poetic ending for Loomis as a character than to sacrifice himself to stop Michael. It's a brilliant ending for Loomis, and as much as I love him in the later movies, I wish his character just stopped here. And then Laurie and Michael, just all I needed was a tiny acknowledgement of their relationship, and Laurie saying his name, and then Michael doing the head tilt. I got what I wanted. This is a great scene. The only nitpick I have with this scene is on rewatch, the first 2 minutes when Michael's slowly approaching and Loomis and Laurie are just sort of like backed into a corner waiting. That part lacks the propulsion that a perfect final chase requires. And number 2, we've got Bud and Karen's death scenes. So all my complaints earlier in this video about how a lot of Halloween 2's kills don't have a good build-up, well, that's kind of true here as well. Like, the lead up to Bud's death is pretty lacking in suspense, but Michael actually killing Bud is the lead up to Karen's death, and that part is incredibly well executed. It's such a chilling image seeing him dying in the background while Karen's unaware, and then Michael approaching, and then just messing with her. This is Michael at his most sadistic and playful. And Karen's death, this is my favorite death in the entire series. It's so creative, it's so vicious. Like, I can't imagine many deaths being more painful than this. To basically be drowned and scalded to death, it's just so memorable. But full disclosure, a part of why this scene is number 2 is Karen. Like, when I was a kid, I recorded this off cable and I had the edited version, and so I didn't see anything. But I was talking to my friend about this movie, and he's like, oh, I have the theatrical version on VHS. I don't know if he used those words. Who called it the theatrical version back then? But I was like, oh my God, I must have this movie. And so I traded in my favorite PC game, the Die Hard trilogy, for Halloween 2, specifically for that scene. And I was one happy camper. And frankly, as I was trying to figure out what was number 3 and what was number 2, I was torn between this scene and the scene where Michael gets blown up. And I ended up giving this scene the edge because of Karen. I'm sorry, even child me knew that he preferred suspense over nudity, because my number 1 is the scene where Michael is hunting Laurie through the hospital's halls. So not much actually happens in this scene, but in my opinion, it's the only sequence in Halloween 2 that really feels like it could have been in the original. Like, it captures that feeling of Michael being this evil, oppressive force that is just circling his prey. And it's got my favorite shot in the entire movie. Like, that shot makes it feel like Michael is everywhere. And while the scene does have its flaws, like, I really don't like how slow Michael walks when he's leaving Laurie's room. That feeling of Michael being in control of the hospital, that's kind of the same feeling that makes the original Halloween my favorite horror movie. So it's natural that a scene that makes me feel that same way would be my favorite scene in Halloween 2. So thanks for watching, and if you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy this, I mean, you could still like and subscribe. If you agreed with these rankings, obviously please like and subscribe. If you didn't agree with these rankings, why don't you like and subscribe anyway? I mean, if you got this far, you might as well, because otherwise you'd be missing out on all of this.
All this Michael Myers crap.
God, I thought Bud said all this Michael Myers content, not crap.